All right, hey YouTube, it's Kenyatta. We are going to get back into Judaism. All right, the last thing that I talked about was the Judges and Kings. I went back and listened to the video, and I was saying that my favorite book was Judges. No, my favorite book was Joshua. Okay, I think I said it once, and then I started saying Judges. But my favorite book used to be the book of Joshua, and I was talked about how I was able in my class in seminary, in my preaching class, I was able to act the scripture out by sermon. Okay, basically kind of do a performance. Okay, for the sermon. All right, so now let's keep on going. Now this may get kind of boring for you, all right, but I hope that you stay with me because, of course, like I said, I do a lot of reading here, and I'm going to continue to do it that way, all right, because I can't remember all this. Okay, all right, now Judaism. Last thing, the Judges and the Kings. I think that was part 2 for Judaism. This is going to be part 3. Now we're getting into exile and captivity. All right. The period of exile in Babylonia from 586 to 539 BCE was a monumental turning point before Christian era, of course. This was a monumental turning point and one of the most emotional chapters in the history of Judaism. Psalm 137 is a manifestation of the sorrow felt by the Jews during the captivity, okay? It tells of their inability, I was about to say, when they talk about how can we sing, happy songs in a foreign land, as long as they were in exile. In quotes, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and there we wept when we remembered Zion. Without a temple, public ritual had come to an end, but in its place, the written word took on new importance. Here we have the written word coming out of the oral tradition, okay? And we're seeing here a reason why the written word is important at this point, all right? During their exile in Babylonia, the Jews began to meet weekly to discuss the scriptures and to pray. They didn't have their temple anymore, okay? They're in exile in Babylon, okay? But they wanted to continue on with what? Their rituals, their culture, all right? Which I talk about, the relevance and importance of that, all right? Our culture base, it's who we are, all right? And it's very important that we are able to practice it, all right? So they would meet weekly to discuss scriptures and pray. And what developed? Okay, what was developed was the Sabbath service of worship, or the Shabbat service of worship, study, sermon, psalms performed in the meeting house or the synagogue, which is a Greek word for lead together. The period of exile made it clear that the oral Hebrew religious traditions had to be written down. Why? In order for the Jews to survive. During their exile, the Jewish people began to assimilate influences from the surrounding Babylonian culture. This is what happens to cultures that are in exile in other cultures, okay? What do? The smaller cultures, they begin to assimilate and integrate into the larger culture and even take on their cultural influences, all right? Knowledge of the Hebrew language declined, while Aramaic, which was its sister language, emerged as the common tongue. Aramaic eventually crept into the sacred literature, the Bible, okay, or the Holy Bible, the Hebrew Bible, rather. Okay, so when we talk, but here, things are beginning to be written down, okay, as opposed to just this oral tradition. All right, so the Hebrew Bible, okay, is written in what? Hebrew and Aramaic, all right? Also emerging at this time was a growing sense. Now I like this right here. Also emerging at this time was a growing sense of an active spirit of evil, often called Satan, and of a cosmic antagonism between good and evil. This is what emerged at this time during their period of exile in Babylon, all right? Although the sense of moral opposition was present, okay, in the Israelite religion from an early time, it may have been sharpened by the pain of exile. So you will hear, and it is true, the forces, Satan, the devil, and Lucifer, these are 3 different energies. They, over time, for some reason, whatever the reason was, okay, especially in Christianity, they morphed into the same being. They're not the same being, okay? Satan is the opposers, okay? Do I have that right? Satan is the opposer. For Lucifer, we know the light bringer, light bearer, something like that. Okay, but anyway, these were 3 different energies. Okay, three different beings, deities, or ideas, whatever. Okay. Return to Jerusalem and the second temple. I want to make sure real quick. Hold on. I'm pretty sure. There is, for those of you who are interested and want to know more about that, there is a channel. Hold on. Satan the opposer, right? Okay. Right. Satan, also known as the devil. My understanding that those are three different ones. Okay. I'm looking at Wikipedia. You know how that goes. Okay. But also sometimes called Lucifer in Christianity. They're not the same. Okay. Okay. There it is. Satan. Okay. Ha means the. Satan means opposer. Satan is the opposer. Okay, not so we found like I'm reading the book of Job, and I told you that the book of Job, it is understood that the book of Job was the first written book, okay, that we have. All right, that we find in the book of Job, the Satan, who again, what did he do? He was really an opposer. Okay, an adversary, not this kind of like evil pitchfork thing that we have been conditioned to understand and believe. But again, here in the Hebrew community, the idea, okay, or the growing sense of an active spirit of evil, okay, didn't come into play until their time in Babylon, okay, during their exile in Babylon. Sure, the idea of a moral opposition was always there, probably sharpened once again by the pain of exile in Babylon. Okay, so in other words, it really wasn't that big of a deal. It didn't have, didn't probably give it any more energy than anything else. Okay, the way I would say Christianity has. Okay, it's just the truth. Okay. Got the answer, but more scared of the devil or Satan or whatever. Then but they got the key. All right. They got the key. They need not, got God and all of this kind of thing, but shit, scared of that Satan boy, okay? But anyway, y'all don't take offense. It's funny. All right, now, return to Jerusalem and the second temple. Now, in 540 BCE, before Christian era, once again, King Cyrus came to the throne, okay, of the Persian Empire. He took over Babylonia, and he let the Jews leave, okay? He allowed them to return to their homeland. Go, all right? The returning exiles, anyway, when they got back home, they rebuilt their temple. They dedicated it in 515 BCE. And what was established as a result of that? The sacrificial cult, all right? The book of Psalms, containing the lyrics of 150 hymns, all right, is often called the hymn book of the Second Temple. And when we read the closing psalms of all the instruments used in the temple, we get a sense of splendor of the ceremonies performed there, okay? Praise them with the psaltery and harp. Praise them with the timbrel and dance. Praise them with stringed instruments and organs, all right? Let everything that hath breath praise the Lord, all right? That's in one of the psalms, all right? At the same time, the work of recording oral traditions and editing written material also grew in importance. Once again, scribes did not want the history of their people to be lost, and the result of their work came to be known as what? The Hebrew Bible. Okay, this is what we do. Okay, this is what people do. Okay, we got to start writing this stuff down. Things happen in history. We don't want our people to lose their culture. We don't want our people to lose their way. Okay, so on and so forth. So we begin to we write them down as opposed to just orally. It would be one thing if your community stayed within itself. All right, there were no outside influences. Nobody was coming in. Nobody was, coming in and putting you in exile and imprisoning you, enslaving you, and all of that type of thing. But these things happen historically throughout the world, and when they do, what happens? Those that are taken, the smaller community that has been taken for whatever reason, or is enmeshed with another culture for whatever reason, they begin to lose their traditions, their culture, so on and so forth, because they begin to take on the larger culture, and especially their language. Okay, people begin to stop speaking their native language and start to speak the language of the larger culture, because in a way it just kind of makes sense. All right, and they even may stop speaking it even in their homes. All right, down the generations. All right, let's go on. Clothes change, ideas change, so on and so forth. We just kind of integrate into the larger culture. All right, for various reasons. All right, at the same time, okay, I read that part already. Scribes did not want the, I read that already. So what do we have? The final edition of the Torah, or the Pentateuch being the Greek word, was made. The prophetic books were compiled. New books were written as well. Several of the last books were literary, such as Ecclesiastes, a dark meditation on life. This is how the author describes it. And the Song of Songs, or what we call the Song of Solomon, a collection of love poetry. The books that would eventually be accepted into the Hebrew canon were finished about what? 200 BCE. All right. Now, let's look at the cultural conflict. Here's some really good stuff here, okay? Cultural conflict during the Second Temple era. The historical record in the canonical Hebrew scripture ends with the building of the Second Temple. The history of the region didn't end there, of course. The history never ends. Because of the geographic location of Israel, it seems that the Jews in Israel would continually have to contend with invasions and in some cases conquests by foreign powers. Now let's look here. We have what is called the Seleucid period. I never know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's spelled capital Seleucid. When the army of Alexander the Great was on its way to conquer Egypt, it made Israel part of the Greek Empire. Okay, Israel was always part of somebody else's empire. Okay, and after Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his generals divided up his empire. Israel was at first controlled by Egypt, which was ruled by the descendants of Alexander's general Ptolemy. Later, Israel was controlled by Syria, ruled by the descendants of Alexander's general Seleucid, okay? In 167 BCE, a Seleucid ruler, Antiochus IV, okay, or Antiochus Epiphanes, he took over the temple. His intention, what was his intention to do with the temple? To introduce the worship of, you think anything Israeli or Hebrew? Absolutely not. Introduce the worship of the Greek god Zeus, okay, to the site, all right? He was Greek. He deliberately placed on the altar a dish of pork. Ooh, hey. Okay, because we know that is a forbidden meat. All right, look at what he was doing. All right, he forbade circumcision. His acts caused such hatred among the Jews, of course they did, that they rebelled, led by Jewish, and they should have. Okay, led by, I mean, it was just like, blasphemous for them and their culture. Here's their temple, and here, but he took over, okay? He take over everything, okay? The religion and all the institutions, all right? And, insert your cultural way of being and living into it, all right? His acts caused such hatred among the Jews that they rebelled, led by a Jewish family of 5 brothers, the Maccabees, all right? Or Hasmoneans, okay? I knew some Maccabees at the church I used to go to, all right? Now, in the text or the canon that we get typically, with the Old Testament and the New Testament in it, that we typically get in these bookstores, the book of Maccabees isn't in it. I'm not sure. I think it's in the Apocrypha. I have the Apocrypha over there. I think it's in the Apocrypha, but you can get a Bible with the book of Maccabees in it. Hold on, let me see. Yep, here it is, the Apocrypha. When I was in seminary, I had to get an Apocrypha, all right? Though we never used it, okay? So I had to get it, and unfortunately, I don't know what happened to it, okay? So I bought this, I think, last year, all right? And I've only read, like, one book out of there, Psalms 151, all right? But, so I haven't read it, all right? But nevertheless, let's continue on, all right? 5 brothers, the Maccabees, led by their family, the Jews took back rule of their country, all right? And the temple was rededicated to the worship of Israel's one God. We already talked about that, all right? The winter festival of Hanukkah, widely kept today, is a joyous memorial that recalls the rededication of the Second Temple. So that's what Hanukkah is all about, all right? The country retained its autonomy for almost a century. Nobody ruling over it, nobody controlling them until what? 63 BCE, Roman General Pompey took control. Antagonism between Jewish culture and the growing Greek-speaking culture in the region was inevitable. Yes, it was, because Jewish culture had values and practices that made absorption into Greek culture difficult, okay? If not impossible. Here's an example. All Jewish males were circumcised, all right? Which meant that they were easily identified in public baths while exercising in gymnasiums, and we know that's a part of part of Greek culture. Public baths, I believe, you know, in the gymnasiums, naked, okay, when they would exercise. Okay. There were also Jewish dietary restrictions that forbade the eating of pork and shellfish, and strict prohibitions against work on the Sabbath. We can find these things in Leviticus, the Levitical laws. These practices conflicted with what the sophisticated Greek-speaking culture called Hellenism, or from the Hellas, meaning Greek. Meaning Greece. The culture was becoming dominant in the entire Mediterranean area even after the Romans took control of the region. Greek plays and literature were read everywhere around the Mediterranean. Greek history, science, medicine, mathematics were considered the most advanced of their day, all right? And Greek architecture and city planning were becoming the norm, all right? The Greeks, took over, baby, all right? Because of its sophistication, Hellenistic culture was hugely attractive to educated people, all right? I like this, all right? Now let's look at the responses to outside influence. And I really like this because a lot of this is when you get over into like the New Testament, all right, and you see what was going on, what was truly going on with who they call Jesus, okay, in the Bible, all right. No J in the language, of course. Yeshua, I think, would be the appropriate name, okay. I think I've also know Yahashua would be Joshua, but Yeshua, all right. But nevertheless, all right, Jesus. Just for common language purposes, all right. Responses to outside influences. Contact with Hellenistic culture led to a variety of responses. Some people welcomed it. Right? Some of the Jews welcomed it. Hey, you know, new way of being. I like this. All right. Some rejected it, of course, clinging to their own ethnic and religious roots. Okay. Understanding the importance of that and not letting that go, not losing their way, not losing their culture. If so, we lose our sense of being, we lose our nation, we lose ourselves. All right. And the rest took a position in between. Tensions led to the rise of several religious factions among the Jews. Let's look at these religious factions starting around 165 BCE. We have the Sadducees, we have the Pharisees. Some of you all are familiar with that we find them in the New Testament. Who was there? Who was always battling with Jesus? Who was always, we got a problem with him. You understand what I'm saying? Who was mad at him all the time? The Pharisees and the Sadducees, all right? And we also have another faction, the Zealots, and we have a fourth faction that we don't hear about the word Zealots. I don't think that word in terms of relating to this particular faction is in the New Testament in that final compilation that we have, okay? But the Essenes, you definitely don't see that term, okay, in the final compilation that was put together. Just because it's not in there does not mean it's not true and correct, and there was some lies, is lies and the devil. No, okay? There are reasons for that, all right? And I'm not quite sure. I think we may get more into that when we get into Christianity. I'm pretty sure, yeah. All right, let's look at this. The Sadducees. Who are the Sadducees? This was the first faction to emerge, okay, in response to these outside influences of this Hellenistic culture. The Sadducees, who were they? Members of the priestly families living in Jerusalem primarily. They were in charge of the temples. They were in charge of its activities. And the fact that they derived their living from temple worship, okay, would have made them traditional, at least in their public behavior. Okay, Jesus was always telling them about themselves. Okay, hypocrites. Okay? You say one thing, but you do another. All right. Now also the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the second faction that arose. Their focus was on preserving Hebrew piety through careful observation of religious laws and traditions. All right. Later, rabbinical Judaism would develop from and continue the work of the Pharisees. So these were not necessary. These were not the priests or of the priestly families, but they just wanted to preserve Hebrew culture, okay, and the observation of all the laws, all the traditions, so on and so forth. And sometimes Jesus disobeyed them laws, okay. He did, his thing, and he had a reason for it. All right. A third faction, eventually called the Zealots, was opposed to foreign influences, and after 6 CE were bitterly opposed to the Roman rule of Israel. Bitterly opposed. Okay, the Romans called them robbers. Okay, now that term might be in the New Testament somewhere. Okay, you might have seen it and not really known what it was in relation to. Okay, if you're not necessarily a biblical scholar or a historical scholar of Israel. Okay, the name Zealots, from the Greek word for zeal, of course, was given to them when wars began between the Jews and the Romans. The patriots sometimes used violent means to achieve their ends. All right, so you had some warring factions here. All right, ready to fight. Okay, all right, to preserve their culture. Okay, and their laws and what it is they believed and who they were as a people. Okay, which is what it boils down to. The Essenes were the fourth group. Now, here, not a great deal is known with certainty about them, although current interest in them is intense. Yes, it is. They were written by, let me see. Okay. They were written about by 3 authors of the classical world. We have Philo, around 10 BCE to 50 CE. Philo was a Josephus, a Jewish theologian of Alexandria, around 37 to 100 CE. And, wait a minute, am I reading this right? No. I'm sorry. Philo was a Jewish theologian of Alexandria. Josephus was a Jewish general and historian, and Pliny the Elder, a Roman writer from 23 to 79 CE. These classical writers indicate that the Essenes numbered several thousand, okay, lived a communal, celibate life, lived primarily in the desert area near the Dead Sea, okay, or, when I was with the Hebrew community, I studied what they called it the Live Sea because of all the minerals in it, okay, and, a lot of it has been extracted, just drying it all up, but I was able to go down there to the beach. They say it's the lowest point on the earth. It was very hot, okay, very, very hot, okay. And get in the water, get in the sea, and don't have a cut, don't have a scratch, okay? And I promise you, if you don't know that you have one and you get in there, you're going to know because it's going to burn like fire, okay, because of all the minerals in it, all right? And, eventually it dies down, okay? And you just float, they will put the babies in there and everything. I loved it, because you just float because of all the minerals in it and everything. You could literally float all the way across, I think they said, to the Jordan, okay? Okay, so it was fun, but it was hot, boy, and it was just so, I don't like that hot heat. I don't. Like, me and one guy were talking at, I went to the drugstore one day, and he said, is it hot outside? I said, no, it's pretty decent. I said, I think they said it's like going to be like 75 today, and I said, and if it's over 75 for me, and we both chimed in at the same time, and he said, it's too hot. Exactly, it's too hot. Okay, so this summer for me has been great because it has not been, we haven't had a whole lot of hot days, a lot of in the 70s, low 70s, mid 70s, even, low 80s. Okay, that's perfect for me. But anyway, so I felt like I was sitting down in, already a hot place. Okay, we went at night, okay, with a big heavy blanket on me, okay, and getting in the water wasn't a thing that was going to cool you off, you know what I'm saying, because it was hot, everything was hot. But anyway, so primarily the Essenes lived in the desert area near the Dead Sea. They rejected animal sacrifice, the Essenes, okay, which was big here, okay. We're talking about the Second Temple, okay. The sacrificial cult was reestablished. That's what they did. This is how they made their repentance or whatever, an atonement, to God, okay, through animal sacrifice. They also avoided meat and wine. We are told that the Essenes were skilled in medicine. They dressed in white. They followed a solar calendar, which is different, obviously, than the lunar calendar that was used in the temple. They studied the scriptures assiduously, I think I said that right, and kept separate from the rest of society. Okay? Moreover, we now recognize that there have been several varieties of Essenes, and that a strict celibate corps at Qumran, called the Covenanters, okay, was supported by a non-celibate network, of supporters and sympathizers throughout Israel. Okay. I want to say this too. When I say I studied with the Hebrews, a lot of times because this hit me, there are several varieties of Essenes, okay, or there are several different sects. There are obviously several different sects of Hebrews. So when I say I studied with the Hebrews, a lot of times when I tell people, just in conversation about life and whatnot, they immediately think that I'm talking about the Hebrews that you see, online on the street corner with, those outfits on, kind of, belligerent and loud. That's not the community I studied with. All right, I studied with the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, led by Ben Ami, who has since transitioned. All right, so if you're interested in I don't know people who are watching. I don't know where you are. Go ahead and put down in the comments where you're watching from, because I'm interested. It's not a lot of views at this point, but that's okay. But I don't know where any of you are. But for those that are familiar, they have restaurants. They're vegan, not vegetarian, they're vegan, and they have restaurants called Soul Vegetarian throughout the states, and various other parts of the world, in Africa. I know at least maybe 1 or 2 countries in Africa. They have missions, and of course Israel. Okay, they used to have Soul Vegetarian here too, but the mission here is not really active. Okay, like it used to be, kind of closed down a while ago. But anyway. In Atlanta, okay, a beautiful complex in Atlanta, all right. They got the clothes shop, and Chicago too, okay. They got the clothes shop, the restaurant, barber shop, I think in Atlanta even they had maybe some kind of like center for people to learn how to work with computers and stuff like that. It's been a while since I've been there, okay, but anyway, let's continue to move on. The Essenes saw themselves as an advance guard, preparing for the time when God would end the world of injustice and bring about a new world of mercy and peace. This is what people are waiting for, all right, even still. They described themselves as sons of light who were fighting against the forces of darkness. All right, where they lived, it was no more than 15 miles east of Jerusalem. So they had some contact with the political current of the day, and they shared some of the ideas, obviously, of the Zealots and Pharisees. Some people believe that Jesus either was an Essene himself or that he studied with them, all right, or that he learned from them, okay. Of course, that's not necessarily biblical, okay, but just because it's not in there does not mean it's not true, at least in that final compilation that they sell to everybody, okay, because we got lost books, we got the Apocrypha. I mean, it's books everywhere. We got books hidden, in certain places that's locked up. You ain't going, they're not for you to read. You understand what I'm saying? That's what they have it on lockdown, okay. But anyway, let's keep on going. Scrolls, and so they got the people who believe that they got this idea from somewhere, okay, and maybe from some of them locked up books. Maybe some information was leaked. I have no idea. All right, scrolls and scroll fragments called the Dead Sea Scrolls. These were uncovered in between 1947 and 1955 in caves near Qumran, above the northeastern shore of the Dead Sea. I first learned about the Essenes when I was in seminary, my very first semester, when I had to take what was it, introduction to, it wasn't called biblical history, was it Christian history of Christianity or something like that? But anyway, it is possible that the scrolls, of course, in church, you never heard about the Essenes, okay? It is possible that they were a more general library of Jewish sacred books brought from Jerusalem for safekeeping during the rebellion against the Romans, okay? Because, of course, they get their hands on it, all right? And it's a rebellion, and you're in exile and all of that kind of thing. If the powers that be will change your history as well, okay? To, for their benefit. Okay, things are reshaped. It says nothing new. Okay, things that we hear now that people want to do. Oh, they want to change history. Honey, they've been changing history. We don't know what's what. We don't know what's 100% true. In fact, we can just go on, a wing and a prayer and a hope. And just, that's what they say. Okay, and keep on going. Get up and work to pay them bills. That that's coming. All right, but let's keep on going. All right. It is also possible. I read that part. Besides containing all or part of nearly every book of the Hebrew scriptures, the cache of scrolls contained works that commented on scriptural books, gave details about the organization and practices of the Essenes, and spoke of what a coming judgment and the end of the world. The Dead Sea Scrolls show that during the latter part of the Second Temple period, there was no universally accepted norm of correct religion. Isn't that interesting? Okay. During the latter part of the Second Temple period, okay, it was a lot of upheaval that happened, okay, in the nation here, all right? So there was no universally accepted norm, all right? The canon scripture was still in the process of formation. The canon, so when I say that, the canon, okay, the final compilation or the canon, okay, when you hear that, there's another Bible I had sitting over here I didn't know. I got them everywhere, okay? The final compilation. Okay, this is the both Old and New Testament. You can tell this is a very old Bible, okay? And I don't mean just in my possession old. You see that? I mean, it's old style. Okay. I'm not even sure the letters of Jesus, the words of Jesus are in red here. Nope. So it's old. This is old. The words of Jesus aren't in red. And I don't know where I got this Bible from. Author and Laura. This is my grandmother's Bible. And there are names in here that I don't know. Okay, but anyway. All right. One of her Bibles. Okay, so when we say that the canon, okay, or the final compilation, that's what we're talking about. What you go buy and pick up in the store, okay, that they put together and said this is acceptable, this is what we don't mind everyone reading. All right, and the information we don't mind them having. All right, let's keep on going. All right, and said there were many books and interpretations of correct practice, each competing for acceptance. The Second Temple was flourishing. The older ceremonial temple-based religion was giving way to a more decentralized religion based on the Hebrew scriptures, on the practice of the Pharisees, and on religious practices in the synagogue. All right. Now, I am going to stop here. I'm just telling you, it's just a lot. And I'm not quite sure. I got to stop because I got to pick my daughter up. She went to a pool party. Okay. But this is just the historical part. It may, continue to get boring. Here we have the development of rabbinical Judaism, which I might kind of skip that. Yeah, I might skip that. Islam and medieval Judaism. The Kabbalah. Christianity and medieval Judaism. And I just think I'm going to skip all that and go to Judaism and the modern world. Okay, for our next thing here. Personal experience, Jewish belief, religious practices, so on and so forth. All right. Y'all be blessed and have a wonderful day. Peace.